Welcome back to Tag Team, the Pokemon Trading Card Game's premier podcasting duo. My name is JW Kriewall, and I am joined by friend of the channel, Jesse Parker. Jesse, welcome back to Tag Team.
Hello, JW. It's great to be back. It feels like it's been a long time since I've been on the podcast. I've been a diligent listener. I listen pretty much every week on my commute to work, a little bit at work, So I
Yeah.
always try to catch the podcast. Love listening, but I got a surprise message from y'all yesterday, actually, that some people weren't going to be able to make it to the podcast this week. So yeah, I was eager to jump on and fill in for your regulars like Riley and Andrew.
Yeah, such as Riley and Andrew. Yes. Andrew was feeling a wee bit sick. Personally, I don't think that that's a good excuse, but he said he was
Yeah.
feeling a little bit sick. His throat was a little scratchy. So, we'll definitely have to give him some crap. Please give him some crap in the comments so we can read that next week. And then Riley was out of town. He's on a work trip. So it's just me.
That's fair.
We needed a co-host. I feel like you could, fill in pretty nicely.
You didn't want to do a solo pod?
I know I have done those in the past.
You have?
I have. Yeah, it's been quite a while, but there have been times back when it was just Riley and I. Riley would be on work trips sometimes, and I would try to scramble for a guest. And sometimes it would work, and sometimes I just couldn't find anyone that I really was that interested in talking to be completely honest. And so I'd just do, a solo episode, but man, that would have been years ago at this point. So
yeah, this podcast's been going on a long time. I mean,
yeah,
it's the longest running Pokemon podcast, is it not?
that is true. We do have that in the description, but it is a fact. I mean, we are coming up on, this is like our 8th season. We technically have some oddities with how we've seasoned our episodes, but yes, something like 7 years.
Yeah.
6-7 years of this podcast.
But yeah, how have things been going for you, JW?
Oh, pretty good.
How's life?
Pretty good. I just got off of a 5-day Mr. Mom extended weekend with the kids. My wife was in Nashville. She graduated from Vanderbilt, and so she went back for her 10-year reunion this last weekend and stayed from Thursday to Monday. So I had the kids all weekend, and we had a great time. We went over to New York. We saw some family over there. Went to a children's museum, ate some food. It was nice. And then just did other things. Went to the store, was an activity. Went to church, was an activity. You gotta make do. I feel like when the kids are this little, you have to turn things into activities, just everyday things into activities. So,
I mean, taking the kids to the store, it is an activity. I mean, when I was just like at Walmart today, and I see, families around with, all their kids and, trying to keep them from touching things on the shelves and trying to keep them in line. And I just remember back to when I was a kid, because I was like a very devious kid. Like I was like doing everything a kid shouldn't do at the store. And I remember I see kids like that at the store, and it just brings back memories. And I'm sure that's kind of like what you're dealing with as a father.
I'll have to ask my parents, because I think I was like pretty good around them. I had a problem of being of kind of going off the rails in class. I would not follow the rules in school, and that was like, I had decent grades, and then I'd always get really poor marks on behavior.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I don't remember being devious with the parents, but I was definitely like, there were other areas of my life where I was very devious. So if you can believe it, if you can believe it, right? But
can't believe it.
I know. But anyway, let's get into it. We got a few topics for today. Most notably, of course, we are both attending the Las Vegas Regional Championships this weekend. So we'll close off the podcast talking about some of our thoughts there and where we think the metagame is headed. Going into that tournament should be a massive one. by the way.
Yeah, I
Just
think this might
just
be one of the biggest. Could this surpass Orlando? I think Orlando last year was the biggest regional we've had up to this point. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this could overtake that as like the biggest regional of all time, perhaps like
yeah.
outside of Japan, because
Yeah. No, I
Japan's
mean
events
it,
are
yeah,
crazy.
and no,
But
it seems likely. It seems likely.
I mean,
Registration
let's see how
numbers are
many
pretty
people are
crazy.
registered. Let's see
Yeah.
how many people are registered. We got
I think it's
currently.
35. But that's across all divisions, right?
Yeah, across all divisions, but you can usually get a good grasp of what it's going to look like.
Mhm.
Um, seeing the total number of players.
Sure.
And I'm trying to load, but RK9 is just not loading. So I think last I checked, it was like close to 4,000. It was just like
Yeah.
just shy of
Oh man.
4,000. So
Yeah,
I
that's
could I
wild.
could see it getting like 3,500 close to Masters. I could see that for sure.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, right?
Here
Because
we
you
go,
have
3,700, 3,708. So
yeah,
we'll
yep,
probably realistically end up having like a little over 3K.
which is wild. Yeah, it's
That's
wild. But
still
it makes
crazy.
sense. I
Like,
mean, what you're seeing is a lot of these players that are going to LAIC, a lot of international players are hitting Vegas as a warm up or, just because it makes sense travel wise to, if they're going to take all the time off to go to LAIC, then they might as well make a pit stop
yeah, that was
in
I
Vegas.
mean, that was my plan.
Yeah.
Was to go to or go to Vegas and then go to, stay there for a couple extra days and then go straight to Brazil. That was my plan. Unfortunately, I couldn't get registered for Brazil, so I will
Yeah.
not be
What a
attending that
nightmare.
tournament. Yeah, that was terrible. I've had very good luck when it comes registering for tournaments. For
Hmm.
Brazil, just it didn't work out. It wasn't in the stars. I tried to hold out for a third wave, and I don't know if you've seen my tweet, but I was holding out for a third wave, and then I had to let my work know, like, what, I just
Yeah.
decided to pull the plug, cancel my flight. You know what? Screw it. I guess I'm not going to Brazil. And then lo and behold, the next
Literally the
day,
next day. Yeah.
like on stream with Andrew, I found out someone in chat was like literally 30 minutes ago
Yeah.
before our stream started on Tricky Gym. They announced the third wave was happening, but there's no guarantee I would have got into that third wave because I think there was only
Right.
like 50 spots. It was just people who
Had dropped.
refunded.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I am happy to see some people, some big names did get in, like Gustavo Wada made it in. So I think that's for as a viewer, for me, that's kind of exciting because he's like, one of, if not the best player from that region. So getting to see him compete is going to be really cool because he did just win the most recent regional in Brazil in Belo
Yeah.
Horizonte with Gabriel Fernandez getting second. So it'll be really cool to see him compete there and maybe who knows take it all down. But yeah, so good. Anyways, Las Vegas going to be a big regional.
Yeah, yeah, I will. Yeah, so exciting stuff. So we're both attending. We'll talk a bit about that towards the end of the cast. Wanted to take a few moments here to discuss a few other topics in the community. First of which was and I'm sure a lot of our viewers watched this as well, the show match between Emma Hagen and Henry Chow on Azul's channel. He likes to do these kinds of matches where it usually is between
A money
two
match.
big, yeah, a money match, right? Two big personalities in the community, right? Where people are very confident in their decks and they generate their own kind of interests, right, through social media channels, primarily X these days, but really
Following
drum up a
Twitter
lot of
beef.
interest of hey, I think this deck beats this other deck. No, it definitely doesn't. And then a lot of people chime in, and then there's kind of this hype going in to these money matches, and then obviously, yeah, putting a bit of cash down doesn't hurt to kind of raise the stakes. But Emma and Henry duked it out. Emma with the Flareon deck that we saw featured. She actually won the full grip event
She
for
did.
the Mega Evolution format, which was really fun. So I got to know her a little bit. Hadn't really talked with her before then, but got to know her a little bit through interviews and just chatting about the tournament. And that was really great. It was excellent to meet her. Number one ranked player, I believe, in Europe at the time. Like right now, they have attended every US regional to my knowledge, and they've traveled a lot. That's all I mean to say. Like they've been to a lot of tournaments so far in the short season, and have a number one ranking in, I believe, number one or number two in Europe, playing their Flareon deck and facing off against Henry with, Gardevoir. What is he going to do in 6 months? The world may never know. But for now, riding Gardevoir, and they really put on a show for us. It was very interesting because Emma was convinced that the Gardevoir matchup was favorable for her Flareon deck, and ended up losing 4-0 in that match, which I found kind of interesting. I felt like Henry, by and large, had worse starts than Emma, but she was very confident and ultimately got skunked.
Yeah. Yeah, Emma, I mean, coming off of a real heater recently, like you said, the full grip event, winning that, and then also getting second at the Gdansk regionals. She actually looked like she was going to win
Yeah.
the whole thing, getting paired
Yeah.
against Daniel Magda on Gholdengo. I even was like texting Andrew like, "Oh my gosh, Emma's like about to win the regional." But nope, yeah, it just didn't work out in the end. Daniel's deck, I mean,
That's right.
at the end of the day, it is just a prize race. So Daniel was able to take it out in the end, but still second place at a regional, that's huge. So she's probably like feeling so confident. And if you look at her tournament run, she actually did beat a decent amount of Gardevoir. So I could see
Yeah.
how there might be some, false confidence there and thinking that matchup is favorable. And who knows, maybe it might be one of those things where like, because I know myself, like I thought a matchup was really favorable until I actually played against someone who was like a real master of the archetype, and then you
Mm-hmm.
find out how good your deck is against that deck, because you
Yeah.
might, even at regionals, you might even beat like good some decent Gardevoir players, but someone who like Henry Chow, who's just like the best Gardevoir player on the planet, he's going to be able to exploit your deck in ways that that might not happen at a regional. Also, there's a lot of things that can happen at regionals. Like I know one of the Gardevoirs, she beat Henry Brand.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up getting a game loss in the first game for something, I don't know what it was, and then the second game he just straight up bricked. So it's like,
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
that's a win, but is it really? Like, so like
Sure.
that's like gonna skew. That's things you can't really see when you just looking at the numbers on, Limitless
Yeah.
Labs. You can't
I
really
know.
get the
I
full
know. That's
picture.
yeah. That's always a danger, right? Of trusting. Like you want to look at statistics, and
Gives you
you
a
have
good
an
idea,
obligation.
but
It gives you a good idea, but it doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily give you the correct idea, right?
yeah. So
So there's always like something to consider there of like, how much should you trust statistics, or how much should you trust you know what others say about matchups
yeah,
versus
so
your lived
maybe there
experience.
was, yeah, maybe there was just something there that Emma didn't see. Did Emma really think the matchup was favored? Who knows? She definitely made people seem to think that some of the tweets she was making. But it's I really like these money matches that Jewel does, it kind of like helps people settle Twitter beef. It's really fun to watch because there's some stakes on the line. I mean, she put down 300 of her hard-earned dollars. Henry put down 300 of his hard-earned dollars, and it was really cool to see. I mean, it popped off. Azul's YouTube
Yeah.
had about 2K in viewership just on the YouTube, which is like crazy for just like a random money match. Like that's like regional or IC watch party numbers. Like, so I thought that was really cool. But
Yeah.
yeah. So I didn't get to actually like watch all the games, but I had it up on like my second monitor, kind of like looking at it every now and then. I was at work, so I had it up on like my second work monitor,
Yeah.
focusing on work because it did happen in the middle of the workday. Uh, but yeah, so I don't know. I was always under the belief that it was a favorite to Gardevoir because the Flareon deck and just Noctowl decks in general just
Yeah.
really struggle with the Iono's late game. Like Ionoing the Noctowl decks late game is
Yeah.
really tough for the Flareon decks to deal with, and it just
Yeah.
seems like that's what happened. I mean, you can get ahead, sure, but like one Iono to three, Iono to two, and then like a Scream Tail to KO your only hoot in play is just
Yep.
something that's really hard for the Flareon deck to deal with. And I think
Sure.
that's kind of like what happened. There were definitely some good games, especially that game 4 that Emma talks about in her tweet. It was a really, it could have went either way. So, who knows? Maybe you run that best of 5 again or best of 7 again. Maybe there's a different result. But yeah, Henry
Yeah.
definitely showed everybody how good it is for the Gardevoir deck.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It is very interesting. I think Emma, is very confident. She's talked about this on social media of why she has a confidence in matchups and in her deck and deck choice and card choices, and it does bring, like, it gives me a little bit of caution. I don't know how you feel about, like, it's I say caution, but I've done kind of a similar thing, and I'll elaborate in just a second. But she made a post here after Gdansk about, like, I I drove myself into poverty, into exhaustion, into depression to play Pokemon. I've quit my job to play this game twice, and, like, you're reading that and you're like, what is happening? This is not this is not something that just anyone would do, but I mean, there's something to be said for, putting all of your energy and focus into your craft. And it
Sure.
kind of reminds me, actually, it's like, I had this, growing up. I went to the Fox Bassoon Factory. The Fox is the name of the brand. The Bassoon Factory in South Whitley, Indiana, and I met some of the instrument makers during my tour because I was going to buy an instrument. And I remember talking to, like, the guy at the factory. Like, he did, I don't know, most of the sales. He was very kind of hands on with a lot of his clients, and he sold to, like, pretty big name clients. And I get in there, and I'm, like, getting my instrument ready, and he basically says to me, he's like, you're not going to make it in this business. And part of him is right. Like, I'm no longer a musician. Part of him is wrong, because I did kind of reach that pinnacle. But the point that I'm trying to make is that he doubted, and I think, you need to, there's going to be a lot of people that doubt you, but to be the best, there you may need to take an extreme measure. you know um, the motivation is different for different people. Preparation is different for different people. Some people, like, really need to, whether it's music or Pokemon, or they're trying to get a job, or they have a job and they're trying to get better at it. Like, they have to devote a lot of focus and attention into whatever they're trying to do. And that personal anecdote just sticks out for me, because that made me really want to get better at it and devote more and more energy to it. And you really have to, like, give it your all in certain things. I don't know if Pokemon is necessarily the thing that I would quit my job for. It's a very interesting prospect.
I mean, I heard this
uh
great quote. I mean, you can't, and I think it's true. It is a true statement. You can't achieve greatness without sacrifice. And I think if you want to be the best,
Facts, dude.
you gotta make some sacrifices. And maybe that's what Emma's going for. I mean, do it while you're young. I mean, if it's something that if you really have a passion for, if you really feel like you can, if that's what you need to take it to the next level, then by all means, if you can afford it, go for it, I say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is a bit of a risky thing, because you might be like setting yourself back in your career, your work career,
Yeah.
whatever kind of field you're in. But I mean, it could always just be a thing though, where you take like maybe you say, I'm gonna set aside 6 months, I'm gonna try to go all in, and then see what happens. Put all your time and effort and resources into it. If it
Yeah.
doesn't work out, then you always can go back and do what you were doing before, hopefully. So maybe that's what Emma's going for. Maybe she's just trying to see, maybe this isn't like a long-term thing.
how far they
Yeah,
can push it.
so
Yeah.
and I mean, she's on a bit of a tear right now, so we'll have to just wait and see, if the sacrifice ends up being worth it. So we'll see,
Maybe
maybe.
it will. Yeah, maybe it will work out. We hope for the best. I mean, obviously not if she's playing against me or you for that matter. Hopefully it goes horribly, but against anyone else, I'm good if she takes the dub. So let's move on to our next topic before we get into a metagame analysis. Let's talk a little bit about Toronto regionals, not for the tournament itself, although there is registration happening tomorrow, Wednesday, or today if you're listening to the podcast
7
on Wednesday
p.m.
evening,
local time.
7 p.m. EST. But what's very interesting, Stephen Kent pointed this out. Says looks like Toronto will be the first event with open deck lists for ASIM Top Cut. Now this was a update to the rulebook that they had made to be kind of like at the tournament organizers' discretion on whether they wanted to allow open deck lists during the tournament. There was language put in place that basically said before a match you could get 2 minutes to review your opponent's deck list, and then you'd have to put it away and you would begin the match. So basically knowing what your opponent has access to. And this looks like it's going to be implemented for the Toronto Regional Championships. So this, I think, is a long time coming, right? We've seen team sheets for a number of years in the VGC, and now this idea is coming to the TCG. Now, I really like the idea of open deck lists at some point in the tournament. I think we can debate where that should happen. ASIM feels like a really good first start, right? Because I don't think you want open deck lists for the duration of the tournament, because there is a whimsy, dare I say, or a surprise factor that is really like kind of core, in my opinion, to the game. So you don't want to necessarily like lose that, but at the same time you want to weigh that against the advantages that players get the more of like a scouting group they have. Because later on in the tournament, if you're a lone wolf, you have a severe disadvantage against the teams of players, right, that are all working together to kind of understand techs and decks that certain other players are playing as you get later on into the tournament. So what are some thoughts, Jesse, on open deck lists for the ASIM cut? Looks like Toronto is going to be the first event that we see this change.
Yeah, I think this is a great change. I was really worried when people were talking about trying to have open deck lists for like any other part of the tournament, like phase one or even phase two. I still don't like the idea of that. Again, like you said, I think there's something to be said about having maybe surprise techs in your deck that like you kind of play around that your
Yeah.
opponent, maybe you intentionally don't show something in game one, like a tool scrap you have that you could end up using in game two or three that catch them by surprise. But not only that, but I think the bigger thing is like I think Azul put it really well. I'm not sure exactly how he said it, but like kind of like playing to outs of like there's a skill to like saying like,
Yeah.
oh, like knowing how most lists are constructed,
Yeah.
and like having that knowledge where like you're like, okay, most Sarah ledges play two bosses, but there's a chance he plays a third. I'm just gonna like make a calculated risk that he only plays two
Yeah.
bosses orders,
Right.
and like
Right.
stuff like that. I think is a skill in the game, and I
Right.
think like you eliminate that skill by like having open deck lists where you could just be like, oh, okay, let me look at the sheet. Okay, I know for a fact he doesn't have this.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it helps decks. I also think it like massively buffs decks like retreat lock, for example. Like we have a million different
Yes.
retreat lockers in format. I think
Yes.
it would be really annoying to just see that like, oh, he's out all his retreat outs. I know I can stick him. Whereas in a real game, like how games are played now, you have to make again that like calculated decision. Like okay, he's like check his discard pile. Like he's down like 2-3 switch cards. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure this is probably gonna stick. Or like again, you lose that mystery factor that like I think that like is something that I do see the pros to having the open deck sheets. I think that like
Mm-hmm.
some people say like the better player wins more often with open deck sheets, and I don't know. Even if that is true, I still just think there is another like again a skill, like I just said, where
to
like you have to
to
make calculated risks.
anticipating and to
Yeah.
to calculating the risk. Yeah,
So
it's different skill sets, right? I think for
yeah.
me, it's interesting that the open deck there was some language put in place where, it's done before the round and you only get 2 minutes and then you have to give it up, right? So it's essentially like during the setup you get to
I
look
don't
and
know.
then you have to put it away. I don't really
But
understand that. I just feel like the sheet should be
nah.
available during
I think
the
I think this is a good thing though that they're making it only in ASIM cut. So basically,
yeah
only in top cut because the reason that that's good is because by that point in the tournament, lots of times you kind of already know people's decks already.
yeah
Also, a lot
yep
of the people that are in ASIM cut have probably been
been
streamed,
streamed
so it's
yep
at a
yep
disadvantage to the people who have been streamed. That people could have, you could have, your opponents could have potentially went and
100%
looked through your deck through your opponent's deck and seen like, oh, he does play a switch, oh he does play a scrapper, a tool scrapper. So I think that it eliminates that, and I think that's like the main reason they're doing it is because like this is gonna help like a player like Tord, for example, be on a more even playing field because like he's more apt to get streamed
yep
because he's a bigger
it's true
name and he might be
that's true
doing well and just for anybody. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense for ASIM top cut. I think it shouldn't go any further than that. I again
I
either
don't know I don't
maybe
I don't
there's an
hate like a
argument.
day two but
Maybe it could if it goes well, then maybe they could make it be for the whole phase two. But
yeah
I don't know. I also think that's kind of weird because now we're doing where like we play one round of phase two in day one, where like you're playing the
yeah
first
yeah
round. So I think that would be messy.
logistically it doesn't work. I mean, i don't i
Yeah,
don't
it just
i don't
adds
think
more
you have a problem.
complication.
I don't think you have a problem with like the literal day two, right? You just hand them out, but that's not what they've decided to go for. I mean, asim, it's a good start. I think ultimately this is
Yeah, I
benefits
think this is a good thing.
players. It's a decent balance, right, of being able to hide techs and deck choices
Yeah.
until a point where by and large a severe advantage is gained from having a bigger network,
Hmm.
and that's
That's true.
generally towards the later stages of tournaments. So very interesting stuff out of the rules team for Toronto Regionals. So looking forward to that, and for all, I mean, presumably all subsequent regionals beyond that. So let's get into the meat of the episode. We are going to talk about the Las Vegas Regional Championships that are coming up in just a few short days. We have been, Jesse, working on decks for the last, I don't know, what would you say, 3 weeks, month?
Yeah,
It's felt like I've had
about a
more
month.
time, yeah, more time to prepare for this tournament than, potentially ever. And I'm still coming down to the wire on what to
You
play. I was hoping,
especially because you didn't go to Milwaukee, so
I know. So I don't have any, I actually don't have any reps in paper in this format. Like I haven't gone to
yeah.
locals. I didn't go to Milwaukee. I really haven't played this event or this format at all. I played an online tournament last night, but
Oh
that's
yeah.
like pretty much the extent, other than just my ladder grind. So, talk to
Hmm.
me, Jesse, about where you're at with your prep and how you've been approaching the Vegas regionals.
Yeah, so I think similar to most of my regionals this season, I definitely don't feel like I've prepped enough as I should. It just feels like to do well at tournaments nowadays, if you really want to make a shot at like winning the whole thing, you
Mm-hmm.
really got to dedicate a lot of time to like a specific deck or like at least like one or two decks, and
Mm-hmm.
that can be hard to do when there's like so many decks out there and so many strategies that are intriguing. So like it's really hard because like you'll be really at least this is how it is for me. I'll be really focused on one deck, like okay, I really want to grind Gardevoir, I want to play Gardevoir, but then like ooh, Gholdengo actually looks pretty good right now, so I'm gonna play that for a little bit, and then you
Mm-hmm.
just jump back and forth, jump all around, and it's like but you can't. But you are consistently seeing like the players that are doing well are players that are like sticking to an archetype, or for the
Mm-hmm.
most part.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like that's something that I think you and Mia both like thought that we were gonna try to do, but I don't know. It's easier said than done. I know for me personally, I just like I like just hopping around because I don't know. I just like enjoy playing different decks. I just have
Sure.
more fun playing different
Sure.
decks.
Yeah.
So yes, but my thought for this tournament was for this Vegas tournament was I want to either just play lock in on one really strong deck, and for me that actually was Gardevoir. Like I actually really wanted to get a lot of reps in with Gardevoir to a point where I think I'd feel quite comfortable playing the deck and
Mhm.
at a regional, an in-person regional. But I can't lie, there's been some decks that I've been really enjoying some more rogue options. Things like Miraidon. I know, very surprising there. You're never gonna, no one would ever think that, right? But
Yeah, I'm not going to leak anything necessarily, but after the Pittsburgh testing, I was just not confident in Miraidon builds just as a standalone deck.
sure.
I I do see where you're going. Again, not to leak what you have going on in your build. I do see where you're
Oh, that's
going
okay.
in your thoughts on Miraidon and why you may ultimately end up playing it
Yeah, there are things in
for
the deck
Vegas.
that are very intriguing and things that could be
Yeah,
good.
sure.
But I think the consistency is like the main issue. When the deck works, it feels amazing, but then there are times where it just doesn't, and then it's all decks like Gardevoir need to
Right,
like just
right.
run away with the game.
Yeah,
And yeah,
and that's where I have um that's kind of where my head is at for Vegas. Not to cut you off there, Jesse, but that's
no,
kind of
you're
where my
good.
head's at for Vegas is I was really hoping to find a deck, because again, this would be my first in paper like tournament with Lily's determination, right? That's the new big card. Um, but I really wanted to find a deck that had strong consistency. I had played Grimmsnarl to Pit, felt pretty good about it, felt like the metagame was quite good for it, and ultimately got a top 32.
Not bad.
Not bad. But the more that I played Grim in this format in particular, the less that I just felt like it was lagging pretty significantly behind some of these other archetypes in terms of consistency, right? You look at Gardevoir and Dragapult both getting Lily's Determination. I think that's a huge buff for
Hmm.
Dragapult in particular, not having to discard resources and just filling their hand, 8, 9, 10 plus with the other various draw abilities that they have in the deck, and then Gardevoir as well, just being able to refill the hand turn after turn. And then you have Gholdengo, which gets a significant buff with the Lunatone Soul Rock package, and that's just makes it that much more consistent. Gholdengo, pretty notoriously difficult matchup for Grimmsnarl, and now you have Soul Rock Lunatone that can attack on turn 1 to get knockouts, plus every list is playing Picnic Basket. And so the more that I'm thinking about Grimmsnarl, the less that I'm liking it. And so that was one of the decks I was hoping would get significantly better with things like Yveltal, things like Lily's Determination. I don't think it's in a bad spot per se, but it's definitely
I think it
not
did get
what.
better. I mean,
Well, it
the
did get
deck did
better, but
get
not
better, but
related.
other decks
Not
got better
yeah,
too.
not in
Yeah.
relation to these other decks like Ceruledge, like
Yeah.
Gholdengo, like Dragapult, right? And so I think it's a very like I still would rate it about where I had it at Pit, right? It's like a very solid counter deck, right? It's like that B tier deck where you're not going to be necessarily surprised to see it win or place highly, but
It's getting results too. I
it
mean,
it
it did
is.
just get a third place.
Yeah,
So
it's hard to argue with the archetype, but ultimately, like I'm kind of as I'm narrowing down my deck choices, I don't love that there's not a draw engine. When we're talking about a
sure.
3,000 person tournament, I want to be at least have the illusion that I'm drawing cards. I want to have an archetype that at its core is going to be able to draw through its deck and get down to the end of its deck and use most of the resources that it has access to, and that just never is Grimmsnarl. So
And then I
again,
think like you make a comparison, like I think we like and our friend Riley made a comparison to like, like doesn't isn't Gardevoir kind of the same way? It doesn't have a draw engine anymore. You don't have Refinement Curlia. You are
mhm,
just kind of like sitting there and playing your draw supporters. But I think the difference is like Gardevoir plays off the board a little bit better.
Yeah.
Also, you do have Mew EX technically to like draw cards, and Fez, which
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
some Grimmsnarl lists don't play either of those. So some lists do play Fez, some don't. But like
Yeah.
Gardevoir does just like, if you have 3 psychic energies, like that you can, and like a Darken your Monkey Dory, you can like make plays.
Yeah.
And Grimmsnarl can be similar, if your Spike move stays in play. But if it doesn't,
Yes.
then
Yes.
sometimes you can be left, you know up a creek without a paddle, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is Gardevoir can. I mean, it's the best one prize deck that we have. Right. You can
Yeah.
attack with Drifloon. You can attack with Screamtail. Um, you can play a very comfortable. You can attack with Monkey Dory. Shoot. You can play a very comfortable
Yeah,
one
you can.
prize
That
game.
Pokemon is such a good attacker.
You can play a very comfortable one prize game for half or more of the game. Whereas a deck like Grimmsnarl, like you're always shoving Grim active if you need to get a big burst of damage, and so that also is like somewhat concerning. I don't hate Grim. Again, this is not me like saying don't play Grim, don't play Grim. Like if it's the deck you have the most reps with, please run it. It's a very solid counter deck, a very solid, B tier deck. It's just kind of fallen out of favor for me for a deck, for a tournament like Vegas. I'm really trying to prioritize having that consistent, very, very broken, quote unquote, trying to play the most broken
Yeah.
cards I possibly can. I think Gardevoir
And
really fits that bill.
that's
For
kind
me,
of why. Yeah, and that's kind of like where you asked like what my prep looks like going for Vegas is. That's kind of why I picked Gardevoir as like a deck that like I wanted to put out of like the meta like S tier decks. That's kind of like the deck that some would argue Gardevoir is the only S tier deck, but I think there are some others that contend with it. But that's kind of like the deck that of any of the top decks, I wanted to make sure I got a good amount of reps in with, because
Yeah.
you just see time and time again, it is just the deck that like is always doing well. It's such a skill expressive deck. There's so many different lines you can go for compared to
Yeah.
other decks.
Yeah,
That
for sure.
yeah,
For
I
sure.
mean it really is like on the pilot to make sure you're playing well, and I think like the more reps you get the better. So that is the deck that I keep jumping back to, is like when my Miraidon deck bricks, for the third game in a row, I'm like, all right, let's go and play some Gardevoir. But don't get me wrong, Gardevoir is not immune to bricking itself. Gardevoir certainly does
No,
brick as well,
no.
but it definitely does. It definitely feels a little less bad since you have some comeback potential with the Gardevoir deck.
Yeah.
But
Now,
anyways, that's kind of like what I've been doing, is jumping between, like, full transparency. I've been jumping between Gardevoir and my Miraidon pile that's constantly changing. I've also been putting a little bit of time in with Gholdengo lately, so that's
yeah.
kind of like where my head's at for Vegas.
And I don't think you're wrong for that, right? Goldango was certainly the story of the the last two regionals, right? Gdansk was really one Daniel Magda with his Goldango list, and Christian Fontenot with the top four with Goldango. It was everywhere between the two tournaments, and I'm just like kind of curious from your perspective why that is, right? I think Goldango, certainly gets buffed from the Lunatone Soul Rock combo. That's a pretty big deal. I think that there's a little bit like there's a boost in consistency if you're playing Secret Box, right? If you're allowed to play Secret Box versus having to play something like Energy Search Pro, that just gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot more burst, the kind of early game like stabilization. I guess not burst, but stabilization potential in the early game, which is nice for that deck. And you're just drawing a lot of cards, right? You're drawing through your entire deck every single game. You're drawing, 6-7 cards a turn. I mean, it can get really crazy with Gholdengo, just the stuff that you're able to do turn after turn after turn. So why do you think Gholdengo is rising right now? Like, why do you think players are looking at Gholdengo as an option, and why do you think it's good right now?
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of got a pretty decent matchup spread across the board.
Yeah.
The deck is just like a whole lot stronger with this Lunatone Soul Rock package. Um, I think like, yeah, it didn't do so good at the couple tournaments, at the first couple tournaments of the Mega Evolution format. I mean, it didn't get any top cuts in Milwaukee. It really just didn't see like any results at Milwaukee. I'm not really sure why that was, to be honest. Sometimes Jacks just don't perform. And then at Lille Regionals, there was one that did make asymmetrical cut. It got a 10th place.
Mm-hmm.
So it was on the map, sorta. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure what. I think part of it was the rise of the Absol Kangaskhan deck. And the Absol Kangaskhan decks all were playing Cornerstone. And I don't think like the
Yeah.
Gholdengo lists were prepared for the Cornerstone. And you did see at least those early Mega Evolution format decks. There were some Gholdengo decks, the ones that did okay, like the ones that made top 32, like our local, one of my local players, Austin Charles, actually got top 32 with Gholdengo list playing a 1/1 Mega Lucario line as an answer to
Sure. Sure.
Cornerstone, which Daniel Magda has, which upgraded and is now playing the Mega Mawile, which is an almost a better Cornerstone counter in pretty much every way.
And saves you a
So
spot too.
it does. So that was like the next evolution of that. So I think like that and like the Absol deck, I think like the Absol Kangaskhan decks were probably just like farming the Gholdengo decks that didn't have any answers to Cornerstone.
Yeah.
So I think that once the Gholdengo list like start, like I'm sure Daniel, I don't know how much mileage he got out of the Mega Mawile, but that just being like an answer to Cornerstone. That is one facet you don't have to worry about now is the
Mm-hmm.
Cornerstone the deck's playing that as Gholdengo. But I also just think, yeah, the deck's just really strong. I think the lists have been like starting to get more optimized.
Mm-hmm.
Playing the Daniel playing the Secret Box list is just a really explosive way to just set up your whole board.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as reliant on you. I think a lot of early lists were playing the Precious Trolley, which I think like now is being phased out. I think because that version of the deck was so reliant on going second. I think
And
that was a big major.
yeah, and because you're playing Precious Trolley, you're really skimping on a lot of the other ball search cards,
Yeah,
right?
so if you were going first with that deck against like a Dragapult, for example, which is one of the most popular decks,
Yep.
you would
Yep.
just get item locked out of the game and you just couldn't set up.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think the list now being more focused on Secret Box and even Christian Fontenot's list playing the Prime
Prime
Catcher.
Prime Catcher is cool.
But the both thing between the decks is similar in that they're playing a lot of ball cards. So when they are forced to go first, they can at least, play a Poffin for some gimme ghouls, get out there, Solrock and Lunatone. And as long as you can do that, the Gholdengo deck can kind of run these stage 2 decks over. You just take knockout after knockout. You can go really aggressive with the Solrock. Gholdengo can just one-shot anything. I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful, especially against these Absol, the people who are still choosing to play Absol. As long as you have an answer to Cornerstone, you are just like farming those decks. Like you just are taking one-shots on these 3-prize Pokemon very easily. So I think like all of that culminated to Gholdengo just being a deck that it makes sense why it saw success. And I think that going forward, I think it'll continue to see success because of those
Yeah.
reasons I just listed. So I
Yeah.
think that's
Well,
something that,
it's
yeah.
going to be interesting. I think that is the main, to me, that is the main storyline of Vegas is what is the response to Gholdengo? Because I think you hit a lot of the salient details about why Gholdengo is strong, right? A lack of counters, kind of primarily, right? You're not seeing many high performing decks play something like Cornerstone. Like we didn't really see any Crustal being played, like these very hard counters that would otherwise
The
keep
Absol
a deck
decks
like
aren't playing them
Gholdengo
anymore.
in check. Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, you're looking at a matchup spread here. You have unfavorable matchups into, Alakazam. That's going to be a relatively low play rate. Cerulege, okay, maybe that'll see some play.
Cerulege also has
Flareon,
seen a dip in play, so that's another reason I
yeah,
think
yeah, that's
Gholdengo.
true.
I think
It was the
Cerulege,
most
yeah,
played. It was the most played in
it
in
was, yeah,
Milwaukee. So,
true.
and then you have like a slightly unfavored matchup into Jellygardy and Terrabox. Like we're not talking about your unfavorable matchups are low play decks that are not unwinnable by any means, and then pretty much everything else is favored or significantly favored. So this to me
Yeah.
is the storyline of the tournament, right? Is what are players going to do to adjust for Gholdengo? Gholdengo to me seems like it's a relatively low like skill deck. I mean, I say relatively, again, there are certain plays you can make that are better than others, and you know that's true of any deck. But relatively, you know, it's a deck that if you have good fundamentals, you're going to be able to pick up and do well with it on just a couple of days of prep. And so the storyline of Vegas is going to be, in my opinion, how decks are built to counter Gholdengo. Some things that we've seen, you know, primarily in decks like Zoroark that maybe have a few extra tech spots, something maybe like you know, Alakazam potentially, are playing things like Airy, playing things like Xerosix Machinations.
Well, Absol is the main deck that I
Absol as
think
well.
is starting to include those. I mean, we did just see Absol doing really well in Brisbane, actually winning the whole thing. Ryuki Okada, one of the best Japanese players, going over, and Japan really dominating in that tournament in general. I mean, there were 4 Japanese players in the top 9, which is pretty crazy. And
Yeah.
yeah, Ryuki Okada playing this Absol list again that drops the cornerstone completely. And their answer to the Gholdengo decks is just playing a combination of Airy and Xerosix Machinations, where you can kind of like use Yveltal to the Yveltal to kind of like trap, you know, a
Mm-hmm.
Genesect against
Mm-hmm.
Gholdengo, kind of stall for a while. And it makes Gholdengo have to like dig through their deck to try to find their Turos. And then when they get a big hand, you can drop the Airy or drop the Xerosix. And that the combination of those 2 cards, you know, if you just get rid of one superior, that's something that they really need to get through, like to get through a Bravery Charmed Mega Pokemon. That's a lot of energies, and when you discard the resources like that, that
Yeah.
could be enough to like win those matchups. So I think that's kind of what you're seeing with these you know, these Absol decks and maybe some other decks playing these like soft counters to Gholdengo and without, you know, just a couple trainer cards that
Yeah.
can, you know, do a whole lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say soft counter to Gholdengo, but I think a card like Airy is like pretty much it has uses in other matchups, but it's like
It
pretty
can be
much
hard to
exclusively
use though,
to
is
rip.
the thing. It can be
That's
hard to
true.
use because
That's
it's a
true.
one of supporter. You have to find it, and you have to find it at the right time. I mean, you can even go watch Kato Arai, I think, played this deck on stream against Gholdengo, and he was the Gholdengo was kind of just like running him down because it's just kind of hard to like play the Airy and the Xerosix at the right time because
Oh yeah,
and that's kind of
sure.
what I mean by soft counter in a way that like they can win you against those decks, but sometimes they are just going to be 2 just dead supporters in your deck, which I think more often than not is going to be the case. But you know, when you do get good use out of them, it can be game winning for sure.
Yeah. Now, one deck that I think is poised to rise with the you know, alongside the rise of Gholdengo is a deck like Charizard. We've also seen, I mean, again, this is generally maybe not in play rate. There, I think was the most played deck, but Dragapult Dusknoir didn't have the performance that I think it, you know, has consistently had recently. I feel like a deck like Charizard can really take advantage of, you know, the weakness on Gholdengo. You can throw, you know, do Chi-Yu attacks into Gholdengo and get ahead in the prize trade. The data maybe doesn't show it, but historically this has been a pretty solid matchup. I imagine that the Lunatone and Solrock just being able to take quick knockouts maybe evens this matchup out a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I do have to think that, you know, Charizard players are looking at a meta that seems about as good as it's ever been, at least in kind of the modern, you know, the more recent, you know, at least for what, the duration of 2025. I feel like this is probably one of the better metas for a deck like Charizard. Do you see this deck doing anything? I guess any of the fire decks, we'll kind of lump them together: Charizard, Flareon, or Ceruledge.
Yeah, I mean, I think Charizard is definitely a fine deck. I think it could be a solid choice for this weekend because I do think Gardevoir actually this last weekend was a historic low for Gardevoir in general. There
Yeah,
just weren't a lot of Gardevoirs placing well, but
yeah,
I think that might give. Hopefully, it doesn't give the masses too much disrespect for Gardevoir because don't be fooled. Like Gardevoir is still just like that S tier deck. It is an incredible deck. So like. I think Gardevoir is bound to make like a big comeback for this for Vegas. I think that is like should still be like the deck to beat. Like I wouldn't focus too hard on a deck like Gholdengo, but I think Charizard's not. I could see that, like you're saying, being a solid play because I think you are pretty solid into both Gholdengo and Gardevoir, which are the two decks I think that are going to be two of the most popular decks. So I think that is a good thing for Charizard heads out there. So I think Charizard a deck I wouldn't ever like. I don't think I'd ever suggest like pivoting to that. But I think
Hmm.
if it's a deck that like you have reps with and it's a deck you enjoy, I think it could be like a good time to play it. I'm not like super high on it. For me, I think like if I could play any deck to like perfection, I think this weekend is like perfectly poised for Gardevoir Jellicent. I think Gardevoir Jellicent is like going to be like the perfect deck for this weekend, and that's a deck that like I
Yeah.
think if you want to be able to win the tournament, I think you got to be able to beat that because I can tell you there's going to be some killers on that deck for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's going to be a deck that you're definitely going to want to have some kind of game plan against. So I would definitely be considering if I was playing Gholdengo, going like Christian's approach and playing like a card like Alana's Aid. You know,
Sure.
that's a card, a one of that you could get a lot of use out of that matchup. I don't know if it
Sure.
necessarily lets you win against the deck, but it at least gives you it would increase your win percentage against it. But yeah, Charizard I think is a deck that seems fine. I think
Mhm.
it's always just going to be a solid deck in this meta.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Just kind of thinking about it more. Yeah. The Dango matchup probably isn't as good as you once
Maybe it's
had,
not.
but
I don't know. I haven't actually played the matchup
yeah.
recently, so
Yeah.
I mean this data doesn't seem like it's good at all. But again, like we have alluded to earlier, you can't always go all
I'm
fully
looking.
off
I mean,
base.
I'm
But
50-50 favorable, 50-50 unfavorable,
yeah, generally
favorable,
pretty
favorable,
good.
favorable, slightly unfavorable, and then 50-50 is kind of to round it out. So I mean, Charizard heads like they know all the lines, right? They've been playing it's like
Oh
Gardevoir
yeah.
heads, right? They've been playing the deck for multiple years now, and are probably going to have just increased win percentages based on that
And hey,
alone.
you
So
have an answer to Chiyu now. You have if you're playing Christian's list,
you
you
just play
have
the
the
energy, the Power Pro.
that's right, the Power Pro and the Vitality Band. That's
I
110 right
know,
there, baby.
I
That's your
know.
answer to the Firefish.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So let's take a look at Gardevoir Jellicent. You brought this up as being kind of a foil to the Gardevoir variant. I'm a bit more partial, and this just might be my general Gardevoir inexperience showing through. I'm a bit more partial to the Turbo Gardevoir,
Sure.
playing multiple Bravery Charm and Drifloon. That to me is a way that I can like close games out faster and just put a lot of pressure on the opponent. I think that things like Tool Scrapper and Jamming Tower are generally at lows
Yeah, we don't
for
see
the
Goldengo list
year.
really playing Scrapper right now. I mean,
No.
Scrapper is not being included in any of these
Well, but it
Goldengo
makes
lists.
sense, right? Because now Genesect is a very weak counter to the Dango lists that play Secret Box or Prime because they're not reliant on those cards to get their energy out,
Sure. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So Genesect is like not that was I feel like the big reason to play Tool Scrapper. You obviously do have Drifloon, but then you're also seeing I don't know maybe half of the straight Gardevoir lists that aren't actually playing a Drifloon, right? They're just playing the Screamtail, and with the Screamtail, they might not even be playing multiple Bravery Charm, right? So they're straight Gardevoir. A lot of the lists that I'm seeing like really aren't even leaning into the Drifloon strategy. But that's neither here nor there. I want to talk a little bit about Gardevoir Jellicent. You look at these matchups in Trainer Hill from the online and in real life scene. And again, I mean, we kind of foil this to the Gholdengo matchups. Like beats a lot of the matchups that Gholdengo has a hard time with, and loses to a lot of the matchups that Gholdengo has a favorable matchup into, right? You think about Charizard as well. We're kind of debating there, but has a relatively difficult time into Charizard, whereas Gholdengo, again, data showing favorable into that deck. Grimmsnarl, obviously going to be pretty bad for Gardevoir Jellicent, but very good for something like Gholdengo. Similarly with the other dark decks, Zoroark and the Absol box, generally pretty hard for Gardevoir to win and ramp up to those big numbers to handle those decks, but very good for Gholdengo. So I kind of see these
Yeah.
as maybe foil
I think
plays for this tournament.
they're very Gardevoir and Gardevoir Jellicent. They're very similar decks. They're essentially the same deck, except the Jellicent version is just cutting a couple cards to fit in like a 2-1 Jellicent line. And I think the Jellicent offers some things that the Turbo Gardevoir list doesn't. I think
Mhm.
that it makes you trade some matchup percentage points into decks like Zoroark, for example, or Charizard or Grimmsnarl, decks where like if you're playing a Turbo list with like Drifloon and Bravery Charm, you actually have like an out to win versus decks like Zoroark versus decks like Grimmsnarl because you have ways of just running them off the board with like, one prize Pokemon that can one shot. Whereas the Jellicent version doesn't have that. You're relying on like this big, you don't have those as many tools to take one shots. But I think what the
Mhm.
Jellicent line offers is a better time into the mirror. Being able to
Mhm.
like lock your opponent's item cards in the mirror is really big,
Yeah.
stopping the opposing Gardevoir from getting Psychic in their discard pile, and then also being better against decks like Dragapult, where I think like a straight Gardevoir line is still going to be pretty good into Dragapult, but the Dragapult deck has a much easier time into that version of the deck. Whereas, again, if you're doing the same things Gardevoir's doing, but also locking items, that's going to be something really good for the Gardevoir Jellicent. So I think that's something that is a reason why I think a lot of like again like top players are I imagine are going to be more geared to playing the Jellicent version because they want to be better against those decks that other good players will be playing, which is like other Gardevoir decks and other Dragapult decks. And I think they're fine saying, well, I'll just take the L to Zoroark, I'll take the L to, a random Grimmsnarl. Uh, but I think there's definitely merit to both decks, and I agree. I actually have put way more time into like the Turbo Gardevoir list
Mhm.
style of deck, and I think that deck fits my style better. I just like being able to, potentially go turn 2 rare candy, boom, blow something up. I
Yeah.
really like that. But I think there's definitely a merit to both versions, and I think it's kind of just something where you gotta like, I mean, don't limit yourself to one. I mean, you should definitely be trying if you're a Gardevoir head, play both. And then like I think that's a real big strength to being like a Gardevoir head is you have these two different you have these powerful cards you can swap in and out of the deck at a win, at a moment's notice. One tournament play Turbo, one moment play the
Sure.
Jellicent version,
Sure.
so yeah.
Yep. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see what the top players choose, the big Gardevoir players, where they are, where they're going. I mean, Henry Chow, if you're listening, please help me decide which Gardevoir variant I would run at
He's got a Discord, bro. You could
Vegas.
go in there. He posts some of his lists sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm just like trying not to pay. I just think how much of a better story would it be if I mean, how goated would Henry be if he gave me a list and then I did well with it? Like, wouldn't that just be the heartwarming story of the year?
No, dude,
I
you
think
can't
so.
join the Gardevoir. You can't join the Guardia heads, man. We gotta destroy them. We can't just join them. Come
No,
on, like,
I think I
nah, no,
can
I agree.
cross the I think I can cross the line for this one. So, last deck that I want to talk about before we wrap this up, and Zork. This is kind of a dark deck that has been on the rise, that we've seen a lot of players shifting towards. We've seen a lot of different builds, right? We've seen Piper do well with her Darmanitan inclusion. We've seen other players do well with like Absol base, right? Foregoing the Darmanitan and focusing on like a Mega Absol strat, and something like uh, the Hero's Cape, right? To just build up these massive Pokemon, these massive dark Pokemon that are hard for most decks outside of things like Gholdengo and Saraledge to deal with. Where do you feel like Enzork is for this tournament? Do you feel like it's in a good position, a bad position, and why?
Yeah, I think like I said earlier, I think Gardevoir is just I mean, Gardevoir's always in a good spot if you ask me. I mean, the deck's just like really strong.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the deck that I'm trying to beat.
Yeah.
And I think Gardevoir just seems again like it didn't have many results this past week the last in Gdansk and Brisbane. So I think Gardevoir is going to be a deck that does really well for in Vegas. So I think whenever Gardevoir is in a good spot, that also means Zoroark's in a good spot because you can just like ride that train of Gardevoirs all the way to the top, because Zoroark is just like that hard Gardevoir counter. Like you want to just absolutely destroy Gardevoir, like play end Zoroark. I think Zoroark's a deck that also has pretty good lines in the decks like Dragapult,
Hmm.
decks that like are trying to like two shot you, where like they can't like two shot you in, or you just get like Reshiram one shot. So it's really hard for those decks to be able to play around that
Yeah.
happening. So I think
Yeah.
like a deck like Zoroark and Zoroark, I think is a deck where you kind of just gotta like play the matchup roulette a little bit. I think if it's a deck that you want to play, it is a little bit of a harder deck to play naturally,
Sure.
because you have that trade. So like you have those little micro decisions every turn. You also have lots of different ways you can play the deck. But I think it's a deck again where like if you put the time in, I think it's a deck that's really really good into the top end of decks. So if you can
Hmm.
just, but it does really struggle against some of the random stuff. So if you feel confident in the deck, and if you also don't mind potentially losing to just some random stuff, like you run into like a random Raging Bolt, you're just gonna lose to that for sure. Then then if you're fine with that, then I think that is a definitely a pretty solid play.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Again,
why you're
hard.
consistently.
Yeah. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna
Oh,
say hard to hate on a deck that has a draw engine as strong as Zoroark.
yeah. And I think that like um that's why you're consistently seeing like one. I feel like every tournament you see like one Zoroark player like top cutting. You just see one, at least one. Maybe two.
Hmm.
And I think that's why. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways to play the deck, and I think this weekend might be the time where maybe it's time to revisit the Toad School line in the deck, because
Mm.
if you want to make sure you're good into Gholdengo now, it doesn't just give you like an auto win against Gholdengo, but it definitely like makes the matchup a lot harder for them and gives you a good shot. Because without it, you're definitely just going to get farmed by Gholdengo. And
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be a good idea to lose to Gholdengo really hard. So I would definitely be looking at, maybe a list like Piper's, but swap out the
Sure.
Darmanitan for a Toadscruel. Maybe
Sure.
it's just as simple as that. So I would be looking at that if I were considering a Zoroark deck.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So interesting stuff, Jesse. I appreciate you taking the time to come
Yeah,
on the podcast.
it was fun.
This has been really, really insightful. I hope for our listeners, because I mean, we're just two dudes that love the game, that are playing as much as we can, and are attending Vegas. So like, what we're thinking is
That's
probably
right.
what a number of other players are. Are thinking about as well. And so, if you're going to Vegas, please make sure to stop by and say hello. Again, we'll both be there. Flights willing. Newark
Oh
Airport.
boy,
I'm flying out of
I'm a little
Newark.
nervous.
I know, me too. Me too. I'm
I'm
flying
flying
out
out
of
of
Newark, and
Cleveland,
so
so
yeah,
yeah, we'll see
yeah,
what happens. I can cross our fingers and hope. I mean, I have historically bad luck at airports, so I'm, whether government shutdown or not, like I'm always nervous going to the airport. So we'll see. Maybe I'll actually have good luck for a change. Especially with not, it would be very, very sad not to go to Vegas with not being able to go to Brazil. So I hope everything goes smoothly and we can just have ourselves a great weekend. I've never been
yeah,
to Vegas, so I'm excited. I'm getting there a lot earlier than I usually do, like getting there first thing in the morning.
yeah.
Uh, so I'm excited to spend a full day on Friday just in, maybe going to some casinos. Never experienced that. So I'm going with
There you
my
go.
brother who actually used to live in Las Vegas.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to visit there and, spend time with you and the boys for sure.
That's great. Yeah, looking forward to it as well. So, if you want to get more plugged into the Tag Team Podcast, you can find me at Real John Walter on X, and you can find the podcast at Tag Team Pokemon. Jesse, anything you want to plug before we wrap up?
Yeah, not really. Yeah, you can just follow my Twitter at Jesse Parker. No A in the Parker. So yeah, you can follow me there on Twitter or X, the Everything app. So yeah, you can follow me there.
Okay, well, you heard it here. You can follow him there. Thank you all so much for listening. Appreciate your consistent listenership. If you have enjoyed the podcast, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, engage with whatever platform you are on, and we will catch you next week.